I am Lisa Douthit, and I am the patient advocate for Myasthenia Gravis Foundation. So I am your voice in Washington. And I, as an MG patient myself, could not be happier to be here today to talk to you all, because as the gentleman said this morning, I do some public speaking as well, but it's just so special to talk to my people. So I'm very excited. So usually about January or February, if you're in some of the Facebook groups for myasthenia, I'm in there going, I need your patient stories, and what I'm looking for is the stories that kind of your trials and tribulations with myasthenia. And I usually get two questions when I ask this question, when I ask for your stories. And the first one is, why would I give that to you? And it's a fair question, you know, because I'm asking for some really vulnerable information of, you know, the pain that you've had with myasthenia. And the answer is because when I go to Washington, D.C., I compile all these stories, and I give them to your individual representatives. So when they're making decisions on your behalf, they're not looking at a balance sheet or a budget that they need to get passed. They're actually looking at your faces, and they're reading your stories. And I'm hoping that when they make their decisions, they're making them with you in mind. And I think that's really important because there's a lot of chatter out there, and especially up in Washington, there's a lot of chatter. And you know, I want them to make their decisions on your behalf and not just to, you know, check off a box that they got something done in the healthcare realm. And the second thing I hear is, I would love to come with you to Washington, but it's kind of a big trip for me and I'm not up for it. And I completely understand that. But know that there's a lot of other ways that you can advocate for yourself or for your family that doesn't necessarily entail you taking a big trip up to Washington, D.C. Now, if you're interested in the big trip to Washington, D.C., I would more than love to talk to you, because I would love to have about 8 million people with myasthenia standing there, you know, waving their flag, our flag. But if not, there's a lot of other opportunities in advocacy to have a voice. And what's really great about the rare disease community, and I'll introduce you to some people that are here to help and support us in every way they can, is that there's a lot of, well, 10% of our country has a rare disease. I don't know if you knew that. There's a lot of rare diseases out there. And alone, we're a lot of little tiny groups, but together we actually have a pretty big collective voice. Because if you think about it, if 10% of our country has a rare disease, and they all have family members, and most of the rare diseases are children, so you add 2 parents with that, and then you add the children and the family members, it's probably closer to like half of our country that's being affected by a rare disease, and that's a pretty big voice. So we actually have more pull in Washington in policymaking than you think. And the more we have a voice and the more we're heard, you know, the more we can actually make some really important changes.
My personal story in relationship to MG is that my dad has it. He was diagnosed about 2 years ago. That was following about 3 years of symptoms, so it's still a little bit new to us, but we're working through it. He himself is definitely a big-time advocate. He does a lot of political work in Oregon, but when he was diagnosed, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, there's some days that are good and some days that are bad. He was receiving the treatment, IV treatment, that caused some skin irritation that made his skin terrible and itchy and all of these things. So there was a period of time where he did not want to leave the house. So I can completely relate to those of you who have your good days and your bad, but there are plenty of ways to participate in advocacy, and I'm going to walk you through it. So again, my name is Lindsey Cundiff. I'm the Associative Director of Patient Engagement at the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases. Our mission is to accelerate biotech innovation to rare disease treatments through science-driven public policy. In other words, you can think of us as a legislative advocacy group that's backed by science. RDLA is one of our programs at the EveryLife Foundation. And that's the main program that I'm going to talk to you about today. RDLA stands for Rare Disease Legislative Advocates. It's one of the programs of the EveryLife Foundation. It basically serves as a clearinghouse and advocacy center for all rare disease legislation. So when Lisa was talking about bringing all the rare diseases together as one so that our voices are bigger and stronger on Capitol Hill, that's what we help organize. Because most advocates might not know that public policy impacts the development of therapies and cures and helps access to treatments and their affordability, ensuring that rare disease patients have an opportunity to influence the life and death policy decisions. That's RDLA's top priority. Some of the RDLA resources that are available for you throughout the year, and again, you can participate on any level that you want. There is no obligation. You can get involved on any level you are comfortable with. And some of this involvement you can do right from your living room. Resources and tools include monthly newsletters so that you're keeping up to date on the latest rare disease legislation, quarterly webinars for urgent state and federal issues. Our website also hosts current action alerts. And we have a calendar list policy events, so you'll be able to get notified on any caucus briefings that are happening on the Hill or any other pending legislative issues that need your involvement. So you also might have heard Lisa mentioning Rare Disease Week. This is our biggest event that we hold throughout the year. This happens every February, at the end of February, to correlate with Rare Disease Day. This is where we bring all of the advocates from around the US to Washington, DC. This last year, we hosted over 400 advocates in DC, I'm happy to report. Pretty good, but there's still a lot of work to be done. We hold a series of events throughout the week that includes our legislative conference, and then we all go to the Hill and lobby together for rare disease, and that's for Lobby Day. We do offer a limited amount of travel stipends to get you there, so we understand that sometimes there's a financial burden, especially if you're someone in the rare disease community, so we do have those options for some of you. For those of you who cannot make it to DC every year, we also offer in-district lobby days, which happens every summer during the August recess when your elected officials are back in their home states. This is, again, just another opportunity for you to meet with your members and build those relationships so that you can help with rare disease legislation. This year, the August recess takes place July 31st through August 31st. And the main goals of in-district lobby days are to advance legislation that benefits rare disease, express concerns about legislation that could harm patients, and again, strengthen your relationships with members of Congress, which is a point I'm going to continue to make over and over again. A little bit more about how in-district lobby day meetings work. Again, all the meetings are held throughout the month of August. The meetings are based off of the address that you register with. So if your patient org is in Kansas City, but you live in Boston, and you register for the patient org, your meetings are gonna get scheduled in Boston, so don't do that. Or sorry, Kansas City, so don't do that. Register your home address. We retain advocacy associates to schedule all of the meetings. So please also do not make your own meetings if you're going to register with us. They take care of all of that for you. If you have special requests, you can let them know. Dates, times, locations, all of that logistic stuff you do not have to worry about. They do that all for you. And they try to get meetings with your congressional leaders, but most of the time it's probably going to be a staffer that is in the meetings with you, and that's just as important. Staffers are just as important to meet with. We also help you in your preparation for in-district lobby days. So if you're nervous or, again, you're worried about the logistics, we deal with all of that. RDLA offers 2 webinars in preparation for in-district lobby days. You can, during that time, you can get all your questions answered. Advocacy associates are on those webinars with you. We will also provide all the update logistical information and any of the materials you will need to have a successful meeting with your congressional leaders. And again, we are with you. We are right there with you. We want you to walk into those meetings an informed advocate and confident in the cause. So any questions, you just let us know. For those of you who are still not convinced about advocacy, I just want to take a minute and validate those feelings. So a lot of the times, I myself am still pretty new to it. I still get really nervous, I still get frustrated, I still get mad, or sometimes crazy happy. All of those feelings are 100% valid. And like I said at the start, some days are good, some days are not so good. So some days, your advocacy level is just going to be liking something on Facebook, or it's just going to be signing a petition. All of that stuff is great, but the biggest, most effective way to push change is to build those relationships with your congressional leaders and meet with them continuously.
Global Genes was founded in 2008, and we essentially exist to support all rare disease organizations. So as most of you probably know, there's over 7,000 different rare diseases. 30% of them which impact children, only about 5% of them right now have an FDA-approved treatment, although that's changing dramatically, which is really exciting. 1 in 10 Americans, like we heard, are impacted by rare disease, and like Lisa said, that means 1 in 10 Americans have a rare disease. So if you really think about how many people are actually impacted, even just in the United States, that's an incredible number, and over 350 million people worldwide are impacted by rare disease, but again, that's the individual. So if you compound that with the families, their caregivers, friends, that's a huge community of people that are all impacted by rare diseases. So what Global Genes is trying to do is help really support anybody who is impacted by a rare disease in any way so that they can be successful in helping either themselves as a patient or just an advocate or their family member or friend. So our core values and passions are that we are intentional, we are connection, we are hope, we are support, and we are impact. So basically what this means is everything we do it very intentionally. So I'm gonna go through some of the programs we have and some of the areas of focus that we tend to stick to, but we do all of that very, very mindfully, and at the core of every single thing that we do are patients. So we wanna help advocates and individuals and community organizations make sure that they can fully support their communities as well as themselves. And our purpose is to connect, empower, and inspire the global rare disease community. So we essentially want to try to create a completely globally connected network that is supported and able to face the challenges that come with having a rare disease. So our vision for the future is, like I said, a globally connected community equipped to face the challenges of rare diseases. So in rare disease, something that can be incredibly frustrating, but I'm sure all of you are a little bit familiar with, is that patients are just responsible for more. We don't, as a community, yet have a Susan G. Komen Foundation that has these walks, that has millions of dollars to put into research for different things. So as patients and as individuals and as small organizations, we are responsible for a lot more. And we believe at Global Genes that if we can help people really understand these kind of 3 overarching areas that are living with a limiting illness, being an architect of your own future health, and really being a partner in driving progress, we believe when people understand these things fully and feel supported and have the tools and resources that they need, they become activated patients. And when you're an activated patient, when you're empowered, you're more likely to go out and lobby and be a part of affecting change. You have stronger relationships with your healthcare teams. You maybe understand what clinical trials are and how to get involved a little bit more, but you actually become a driver of the progress that your community desperately needs. So this is a slide that kind of illustrates everything that Global Genes tries to do. So this arrow is not necessarily a continuum, but essentially what this is trying to illustrate is all the different ways that we feel that rare disease individuals, organizations, and advocates can get involved in rare disease advocacy. So advocacy can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. It can mean lobbying, it can be very policy and legislative driven, but it could also mean starting a support system for your local community or having support groups online for for, people with MG. It can mean a lot of different things. And so this kind of highlights the different areas where we feel individuals and organizations can really become drivers and partners in everything that has to do with advocacy in the rare disease space. So everything from really becoming an expert on your own disease to maybe starting a nonprofit to maybe even starting a biotech company to focus on something that you think is really important in your space. We also really try to educate individuals and organizations about the clinical research process or the drug development process and how patients can really get involved at each step of this progression. So it's really important, and we work with biotech companies, we work with researchers to really help them understand that if things are going to be successful, if you're going to have a successful clinical trial and bring a drug to market, there are certain people that need to be at the table when you're having these conversations, and patients are by far the most important. You guys are a wealth of information. You are by far, the experts on your own disease, and if patients aren't involved from kind of day one, you're looking at something that might not be, as successful. So we have a lot of tools and resources to help you understand what this process looks like, what you can do at different stages of this process and how you can get involved, what talking to the FDA looks like, maybe how to actually start having a better relationship with a company who has a therapy or has a clinical trial in your rare disease. So we have a lot of tools and resources that talk about all of this, and we try to provide trainings and opportunities for people to really get more involved and to understand what this process looks like, what it means for them as an individual, and what it means for them as a community. So some of our major resources that we have, and you can find all of these on our website, which is globalgenes.org, but we have some really great ones that I want to highlight, and hopefully you guys got to stop by the table in the back and pick up a couple of these. But we have a really amazing page on our site that has all of our toolkits. And so essentially our toolkits they're kind of deep dives into different aspects of living with a rare disease that maybe need a little bit more support. So we have a toolkit on navigating your health insurance. We have one on we did a great one with EveryLife Foundation on, building that relationship with your representative. We have a toolkit on starting support groups in your local community, on advocating for your kids at school. So we have about 40 different titles, and we have thumb drives actually at our table in the back as well in the exhibit area that have all of them on there. But there's just a plethora of really fantastic resources they're very blanketed, so anybody within the rare space hopefully can use them. So they're not disease specific, but they should be able to help alleviate some of the stresses and some of the challenges that you're finding as a rare disease individual or advocate. We also host webinars that focus on different topics, and so I'd like to point out that we work with hundreds of rare disease patient organizations, and they actually sit on our Foundation Alliance, and we have about 500 of them right now. And so any toolkit that we produce, any webinar that we have, any type of educational or resource support comes directly from that Foundation Alliance. So we kind of do these audits a couple times a year to find out where's there still a lack of resources? Where do organizations need support? And we do surveys, and we make sure that we fully understand where there are some pockets that we still could be filling in some information. And that's how we create all of our toolkits, all of our webinars, any of our educational materials. So it's vitally important for us to hear from the community, because if we don't know that a resource needs to be created, we're not going to create it. So we try to make sure that we listen. So if you ever have an idea for a resource that might be really awesome that you think could apply to the larger rare disease community, let us know. We very much appreciate people reaching out and letting us know kind of what they're looking for. We have a podcast, the Rarecast, which is pretty awesome. It kind of goes through, and there are 20 to 30-minute podcasts that kind of talk about everything going on in rare disease. So there's some just really cool information about things that are happening in science, or things that patient organizations or individuals are doing. So they're kind of fun. I listen to them at the gym, but they're great. You can find those on our website as well. And I touched on the webinars. These are open to anybody in the community, and so you can find the schedule of webinars on our website as well, and how to register for them. And they're all housed on our site, so if you happen to miss one, or if you hear that one happened on a topic that you like, we keep them all. So you can go back and look at them at any point in time. There's some really amazing There's some really amazing webinars that have been conducted already that are living on our site, so I recommend checking them out and letting us know what you think about them. If you think we could be diving in a little deeper in an area, we love that kind of feedback. We also host a number of events every year to really, again, bring the community together and also highlight some of the things that are going on and some of the resources that we think are really important for the rare disease community to know about and to try to engage with. The largest event that we host every year is our Rare Patient Advocacy Summit. It happens so this says Irvine, Pennsylvania. This is like the third presentation I've done and forgotten to change this. It is not, Irvine is not in Pennsylvania, it's in California. So our summit happens in Irvine, California in the fall every year. This year it's from October 3rd through October 5th. And it's a really amazing summit. If you haven't been, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's 2 really full days of just amazing information. We have hundreds of rare disease patients that come, researchers, clinicians, people in the biotech and pharma space, all of these key stakeholders in rare disease, in one place, one hotel, for a couple of days. The agenda's on our website. It is incredibly powerful this year. Check it out. We do offer travel scholarships, so you can apply for those as well to help alleviate a little bit of that. But it's awesome. It's a really fantastic summit. I encourage you all to check it out, and I'm happy to speak with any of you about that a little bit more or any of this information. We also hold a one-day patient advocacy symposium. That one is actually in Pennsylvania. It's in Philadelphia. And it's coming up in just a couple of weeks. And this is a one-day symposium that we do in conjunction with the University of Pennsylvania and their Orphan Drug Center and their $1 Million Bike Ride. So if you're not familiar with UPenn or the $1 Million Bike Ride, it's a really amazing fundraising event. And we work with them and we do this full-day symposium that's very centered around the drug development process. So like I talked about earlier, there's all of this information and all of these ways that patients and advocates and organizations can be involved in the clinical research process. And so we do a very deep dive day around that topic. And this year we're doing 2 tracks. So there's, a track for people who are a little bit newer and don't really know a lot about drug development. And then there's a track for people who are a lot further along and are ready for some deeper level information. So definitely check that out. And we also do a Rare on the Road tour. So with EveryLife Foundation, we piloted this last year and it was incredibly successful. And so we did 3 cities last year, we're doing 3 again this year, and they're one-day conferences where we talk about different aspects of advocacy, the way Global Genes, does advocacy, and then EveryLife Foundation comes in and talks a lot about what Lindsey just said, engaging with your representatives, how to do that, how to create those relationships, and we try to give you a full day of information on all the different ways that you as individuals and as an organization can really get involved in advocacy in the rare disease space. So check those out if you live anywhere near any of these cities. There are travel scholarships for this as well. All of this is on our site, or again, I'm more than happy to chat with you after or anytime over the next couple of days.
I'm Kristen Angell. I'm the Associate Director of Advocacy for the National Organization of Rare Disorders. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about our Rare Action Network. That is the advocacy arm of NORD. It's a grassroots-based organization that is developed to empower and educate advocates on being effective advocates in their communities and educating for both state and federal policy issues across all 50 states of the U.S. So rareaction.org is our website. And you'll see a lot of references to Missouri since we're here in Missouri today, so I chose that as my example. There's a couple ways to get to, we have 50 state action center pages, and on those pages are state resources and information. Also, it will list if we have a state ambassador, that we had launched a state ambassador program last year. It's volunteers that are pretty much the liaison between what's going on in the state and NORD, and we work with them on advocacy efforts within the state. And as you can see, Missouri has a ambassador. So you can either go to rareaction.org and go under the resources for Advocates tab and drop down to State Action Center, or you can actually visit like raremo.org. So every state has their own URL as well, so it would just be rare with your state's initials. Unless you're from Georgia, you have to spell out Georgia for that one. Don't go to rare GA. So I'm going to talk a little bit about policy issues, both on the federal and state levels. Our Rare Action Network does predominantly focus on state advocacy initiatives, but advancing basic and transitional research is one of our key priorities. Ensuring access and affordable treatments is also another, and strengthening the drug development process and advocacy in your own communities. So those are some of our focuses. In 2015, we published the very first ever state policy report card that took a look at each state and where they stood in different categories and initiatives under the policy efforts. We just recently published this past March our 3rd edition of the state policy report card. We've added issues to it, and we've also updated from previous reports as to where the states stand on certain policy issues, which I'm going to talk about. So these are the issues highlighted in this year's state policy report card. Some are from previous reports and have been updated, others are new issues. Medical foods coverage requirements to ensure that patients are receiving coverage from their insurance company, to educate on, to make sure that they have access to the medical foods that they're being prescribed. Prescription drug cost sharing. NORD supports the legislation to make sure that patients do not have excessive bills on paying for medications. So a lot of times the insurance companies will put more of the burden on patient advocates. On patients, sorry. Newborn screening, we've been very vocal in making sure that the states have listed newborn screening panel from the first and secondary conditions that there's an organization in DC, and I'm going to mess up the name of it, so I'm not even going to attempt to say it, but it's the RUSP, and they recommend first and secondary conditions for newborn screening. States have their own ways about going about putting these newborn screening to test, and they can also decide which rare diseases to test for. So we support any legislation that will make sure that the first and secondary recommended newborn screenings are listed on the state's newborn screening panel, but also ensuring the process in which they are added. So you could, in some states, you have to actually get legislation passed to get a new disease added to the platform. In other states, it's just as simple as going to the health department and having it listed. So we kind of also track on the side of making sure that the newborn screening is getting, the diseases are getting listed, but also how quickly do they go to actually being listed to actually being enacted, and making sure. Medicaid eligibility, NORD is a big supporter of expansion of Medicaid. We really advocate to make sure that all 50 states do eventually expand. I believe this is an area that Missouri failed on the report card. But we are, and CHIP eligibility as well. A new added initiative that we took a look at this year is Medicaid 1115 waivers. Those are waivers that states can access to bypass some of the regulations behind Medicaid. We do not feel that those are actually of benefit to the patient community. There are rare patient community. There are work requirements being added, and even some, it could affect lifetime limits. So we definitely oppose the waiver program as it is. Biosimilar prescriber communication, that is when biologics that are about to come off patent are being developed. There's similar ones where they are so-called biosimilars. They're biologics, and we just want to make sure that when a patient is prescribed by their doctor a specific biologic medication, that when it goes to the pharmacy and it comes down to the insurance company could say, well, we'll pay for the biosimilar rather than the biologic because it's a little cheaper. So we just want to make sure that there are laws enacted in the states that ensure that the pharmacist is communicating directly with the doctor to make sure that that is an okay switch to substitute that specific biologic, because in some instances it could be a life or death matter. Rare disease advisory councils is another issue that we have taken a good look at across the state. There's been, I believe, 5 advisory councils initiated in 5 different states, and there's about 13 states that are currently working on such similar legislation. Now, these councils are usually chaired by state legislators or representatives, as well as patients, caregivers, industry representatives, and medical professionals that all specialize in rare disease. These councils advise the state legislation on any kind of legislation that would directly impact the rare community in your state. So they would give recommendations. They meet a few times a year and give recommendations. And they also pool resources throughout the state and kind of do the research on rare patients within the state. So they're very important, and we strongly support those initiatives. So this is an example. If you visit your state's URL, the raremo.org or however, these are examples of a snapshot of the state policy report card that you will find for your specific state. It will have a little briefing of where they excel and where they fail. They actually have the full grades on the sites. And for examples, there's Kansas and Missouri are up here today. And you can actually take a look and see where your state lands in all of these different categories on your state's Action Center page. And it was Medicaid expansion that they didn't do too well here in Missouri. So this is a snapshot of some of the maps across the country that we have in the full state report card that you can download on rareaction.org. And this kind of shows where each state lies. Blue is typically an A or very good, and orange is not good. And as you can see, there's a lot of orange across the country and they all are very broad in what they cover. So this is just kind of a snapshot of what's in the report and how you can compare what your neighboring states are doing as well. To get to the state report card, there's a couple ways. You can visit, obviously, your state URL or go up to the resources for advocates and download the report card. It's also a button on the homepage of the Rare Action Center. And the full report has all appendices. It has very in-depth information. I know I covered briefly about all of these issues and topics, but it even has a few more that I didn't cover. But you can certainly read through this report and get a better understanding of the scoring rubric that was a part of getting these grades, how we came to that decision, and then what you can do. So we have, as I mentioned, state ambassador program. We have state ambassadors in 31 out of the 20 states currently. We're adding new ambassadors daily. So the first thing I would suggest doing is visit the Rare Action site and join. There's a button on the top of the page that just says join. You give some basic information, and you'll be linked up to your state's mailing list. So you'll get email notifications when there's an event or activity or advocacy call to action in your state. And then you'll also get communications from NORD in regards to just more broad federal advocacy efforts and action alerts as well. You can also, if there is not a state ambassador in your state, from what you gather on your page, we are always looking for new ones, so maybe consider applying to be a state ambassador for your state. If any of these specific issues have affected you directly, we're always looking for patient stories to share their stories. We use them when we meet with legislators and elected officials, and it's always helpful to have an actual example, especially in each state, of how these issues are directly impacting the rare community. So, share your story with us. We're always looking for more information. And meet with your elected officials. I know there's some great, lobby days and activities that are coming up. I highly encourage it, both on a federal level and a state level. You have to, and I'm going to echo your words, you have to be effective advocates by continuously meeting with your legislators. It doesn't happen in one sitting. I wish it did, but we know politics. Nothing happens in one sitting. So I'd encourage you to meet with your legislators. Let them know about this report. Bring a copy of the report with them, or even the snapshot of your state's report card, and let them know it's out there. A lot of legislators that we meet with are surprised to see it, and then they're even more surprised when they see an F or a D in one of the grading areas, and they want to work with you to improve upon those issues. We host Rare Action Network advocacy luncheons across the country. We have one coming up later this week in Houston, and then we head to Phoenix. I believe we have one in Maine, California in September, and Oklahoma in October, and Colorado at some point. So you can listen, you go find all of that information on our website as well. And follow us on social media as well to make sure that you're staying up to date in information.